Hello everyone and welcome back to the Degree of Footy. I'm your presenter Harvey Kennedy and I'm joined alongside me by my usual cohorts Henry and Murray. But today we are joined by the one, the only Arlo White, who's had a very successful career working with Live Golf, NBC, and he's the star of Ted Lasso. Arlo, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome. I didn't mess it up. I'm quite proud of myself. No, but how have you been?
Yeah, been good. It's been a busy time because Live Golf started up again in February, and we were in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We went straight from there to Adelaide, Australia. Came back for a couple of weeks, and then it was Hong Kong straight to Singapore. Got back on Monday, so I've got a bit of the brain fog going on at the moment, and it's Miami next week. So,
wow.
These are first world problems, really. Yeah. It's nice to travel the world and broadcast sport. Broadcast this great new golf league, and really good fun is being had.
Any reason you're going to Miami?
That is a live tournament.
Is it? Oh,
yes,
amazing.
But I am taking the opportunity to go out a couple of days early.
Well, it's got to be done.
For a bit of sunshine, yes, why not?
100%. Well, I want to start off by going straight into your career. I want to talk about the Premier League. Yeah. Is there a particular game that you're very fond of or you have a fond memory of commentating on?
Gosh, there are so many, Henry, because each weekend for the Americans, I was doing basically Saturday and Sunday, and it was the Saturday 5:30 kickoff, unless there was a Manchester derby at 12:30. Very rarely did any of the 3 o'clock kickoffs because a lot of the plum fixtures didn't fall into that window. But then you're either doing whatever the best game is on Sunday, and generally the game of the week would be the 4 o'clock or the 4:30 kickoff on a Sunday. So it was Merseyside derbies all the time, Manchester derbies, at the time, Liverpool, Arsenal games, all that sort of thing. So there are many very good games. I pick out a couple. 3. Liverpool Man City, when they were at the height of the Klopp-Pep rivalry, when they were both getting about 1 million points, but Man City would always get one more than Liverpool. Sorry, lads, but in that era, and I thought Klopp and Liverpool were very unlucky in that era. But there was the 4-3 at Anfield when Liverpool won, and City got a couple of late goals to make it really interesting at the end. But that was incredible. The 2-1 at the Etihad, which eventually really gave City the league in that season. That was the match where John Stones cleared the Mohamed Salah effort off the line by about 15 millimeters or something.
It's so tight, isn't it?
It was honestly an exhausting game to commentate on because the quality and the tempo was so high that after the game I think I did it with Lee Dixon, we were exhausted. But loved it because you could not take your eye off that football match, even to look at a note, because you'd think you would miss something. So I think that in terms of quality and excitement and pure sort of drama, that was definitely one. But then I suppose Leicester's title-winning year. I think the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the Monday night where Chelsea came from 2 goals down to draw with Spurs and Leicester won the league. But then the following Sunday, when Andrea Bocelli came out and sang Nessun Dorma, and Leicester were giving the we actually beat Everton, stuffed Everton 3-1 that day. Leicester stuffed Everton 3-1 that day. But I think that's a day and a match and an occasion that will stick long in the memory.
I think, just for a bit of context for the viewers, it was 2013, I think NBC got the rights to the Premier League, was it?
Yes, we did for the 2013-14 season initially, yes.
I mean, obviously you've commentated on loads of games. Is there a moment where you've made a mistake live on air? And what was that like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, looking back, I only got the wrong goal scorer once.
That's a pretty good track record.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I might be wrong, but I think I confused Nicholas Bentner with Per Mertesacker. And in my defence, it was the top gantry at the Etihad, which you needed, a telescope to see the action from, and it was a case of guessing, and that taught me in that moment never guess. So I learnt a lesson from that, and I think it was a consolation goal in an Arsenal 6-3 defeat anyway. So it wasn't exactly a winning goal that meant anything. I mean, you make little mistakes, all the time that perhaps only you know about, but I don't think there are any absolute howlers that stick to mind, because you are in a state of just such high vigilance for that night or 2 hours on an afternoon that you try and minimise those situations, and you also learn, coping mechanisms if you're not entirely sure about something. If there's a melee at a corner, someone sticks it in the back of the net. Again, rather than guess, you wait for any clue that you can see who's being celebrated with, have a look at the monitor. So you try not to make those mistakes. And I think as you get more experience, you realise and you sort of develop techniques so you minimise them. You always want to do it better, but it's live. And you often just have to deal with what you've said.
Yeah, 100%.
So whether you regard it as a mistake, there's always that. When you listen to it back on the odd occasion that I did, I'd be like, oh, why didn't you say that? Why didn't you say that? So the mistakes that are kind of known only to me,
From your years of reporting and commentating, are there any players or managers that you've got on very well with, or you've had strong conversations with?
Yeah, I got on very, very well with Brendan Rodgers when he was at Leicester, and I think the Leicester link didn't really hurt in that situation. But we did a series called Inside the Mind that I think I spoke to you chaps about last year sometime, and it was. Foreign broadcasters were granted 10 minutes for a certain period of the season with top managers, and there were 5 overseas broadcasters there doing it, and we had to find a way of making that or getting as much out of those 10 minutes as we possibly could, and we came up with this concept of Inside the Mind. So you're talking to these managers about the game of football, all the players. You're not after are you going to resign? Who are you going to sign? All that sort of stuff, which I kind of used to do a lot of at 5 Live, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I preferred sort of like the conversational side of it. So Brendan was great, but Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, I think, are two managers I put in that category. And I remember the first time talking to Pep, and he kind of sat down, and it's probably the 5th of the 5, so he's been there for nearly an hour, and he's probably had enough, to be honest with you. And I remember the first question was something along the lines of, how far into a game of football do you know exactly what the opposition are trying to do? And he suddenly sort of perked up a little bit, because he was going to have to talk about, or he wanted to talk about, the very in-depth technical football. And he engaged from that moment. So every time I spoke to him after that, he was kind of up for the chat. Yeah. But I do remember a few very good interviews with Jurgen Klopp. And then during COVID, we did a lot of Zoom interviews. And, I was sat there waiting in my office at home, and then you just don't know when they're going to pop up. And then suddenly Jurgen Klopp pops up, and he went, "He is the commentator from Ted Lasso." And I was like, oh my God, have you been watching it? He says, my wife says you have to watch Ted Lasso, and I watched it. He said, it's the first time you've sounded good doing a commentary. Like this. Oh, great, thanks, Jurgen. But yeah, that was a sign that we had a good rapport. And,
that's brilliant.
And developed it over 2 or 3 seasons, and he was always just great value to talk to.
Yeah.
Well, we've still got a million questions to ask you on Inside the Mind, because you literally spoke to loads of great managers. Yeah. I just want to talk to you a little bit about Rebecca Lowe, because I know you did a lot of work with her on NBC.
Yeah.
Now she's on It's Called Soccer with Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, I hope I'm right.
Right. I'm not sure, to be honest.
Don't worry, we won't clip that bit
out of the loop on
that. But when you see her now doing so well, what was that like working with her? Was she just great to get along with?
Yeah, great. She was in America and we were based over in the UK, so we didn't see a great deal of each other. They used to come over as a team, which was Rebecca and the 2 Robbies used to come over for trips, and we'd do 3 games in 3 days, and I'd host the pitch side desk. These were great weekends, to be honest. They were hard work, but they were good weekends. Rebecca would be in the studio, and they rotate all the guys around to be in the studio, and she'd cover off all the the build up to the games and all the other games that were going on, and I'd be on the side of the pitch. And 10 minutes before kick-off, we would hand back, and then we'd dash up to the commentary box or the gantry, and we'd do the games from up there. So Yeah, it was great. We produced between us all. We produced some really good stuff, and then, I go over to America and cover for her when she was like hosting the studio coverage when she was at the Olympic Games or the Winter Olympics or on maternity leave. So I had some great experiences with that. But yeah, we were familiar with each other from the BBC days. But yeah, we got the job at around about the same time, and it's going. I think from what I gather, going from strength to strength. Yeah.
I mean, there's a great clip of you and Jason Sudeikis, and when he calls your voice relaxing, I mean, what was your reaction to him calling your voice relaxing?
Pretty good. I think he said something like
like velvety.
Well, he said buttery or something.
Yeah.
Buttery,
It's like Miles Davis. No, it's Elle Macpherson farting into Miles Davis's trumpet.
That's the one.
Which I should have got made into T-shirts.
It's never too late.
No, exactly. That was great. I mean, we did a promo, Rebecca and I, with Jason and with Brendan, Coach Beard, about 9 years before Ted Lasso came out. And it was one of the funniest days of my entire life. And I remember getting on really well with Jason that day. And you could tell he was really getting into the Premier League. Brendan was the guy that was massively into it and was getting Jason gradually into it. And I didn't expect them to turn it into a TV series. But then to get the call when they did... and he said something like, "We need you to help, legitimize some of this nonsense." And I thought, okay, sure. And that was just an amazing opportunity. And I saw him a couple of times during filming. And I remember we text each other every now and again. And I remember saying that. I remember the Liverpool, Matt McCann, the press officer at Liverpool, who's absolutely brilliant. He's saying, look, Virgil van Dijk really wants to get in touch with Jason. Can you sort it out? So you text Jason, and then you say, yeah, get Virgil to get in touch with me. And you kind of think, that's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
You're putting Virgil van Dijk, one of the greatest Liverpool players ever, in touch with, one of the greatest comedy actors ever. And you wonder what that night out might have been like if they'd been out, but they kept that one under wraps. But yeah, so from that perspective, it was great. And it was nice to have a fan, if you like, in Jason who believed in what I was doing enough to give me a role in that show. That was brilliant.
Now we're going to go back to Inside the Mind.
Yeah.
I know you were just talking about it then. I mean, just to list some of the managers you spoke to, I mean, Frank Lampard, Mauricio Pochettino.
Yes.
You even interviewed players as well, like
Yes.
Salah. If you had to pick out of all of them, I know you said Pep and Klopp, but who would you say is your favourite, to get along with?
Well, Pochettino, that one afternoon, Spurs were going okay at the time, so he wasn't sort of on his way out, because I think the slump and the decline came quite quickly for Tottenham under Poch, didn't it? After that really good, and amazingly didn't win a trophy at Tottenham, but he's not the only one, and it's so frustrating for Spurs fans, but I actually was rooting for Poch to win something with them because he was so good for that club and so good for the Premier League. But I remember he came in 3 hours late for an interview, and at that point you're kind of like, well, there must have been something important because he's a decent fella. So anyway, he came into the room and he shook hands with everybody and asked where they were from, and the cameraman, the sound guy, the producer, and all that sort of stuff. He got round to me and he says, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Leicester." And he said, "Who do you support?" I said, "Leicester City." And he said, "You've got our trophy." And I just went, "I know." And I didn't mention they finished third, but that was cool. And he gave a good interview. Salah was always brilliant, absolutely brilliant. A really genuinely wonderful guy who, again, as long as you're asking him, decent questions. You're not being silly, then we'll sit down and give you good, considered responses, and he can have a laugh as well. And so going to see Mo Salah was absolutely brilliant. I'm trying to think who else. Raheem Sterling was disappointingly moody quite a lot of the time.
Was he?
Because I really root for Raheem, because of all the stick he used to get in the newspapers and that sort of thing. But he'd always be a bit mardy. Kevin De Bruyne is like getting blood out of a stone, honestly. I mean, I don't know whether I saw him on 2 bad days because I'm a huge fan of his play, but he wasn't necessarily sunshine and light.
These one-on-one interviews. One-on-one.
Yeah. Vincent Kompany was excellent. Harry Kane was excellent. Heung-min Son, what a great. I mean, the story of him winning the gold medal with South Korea at the Asian Games, because if you're from South Korea, obviously been on the border with North Korea, you take this idea of military service very seriously. You're not actively seeking or publicly seeking to get out of it. But if you do win a gold medal, you are therefore exempt from military service. And it's 2 years of your life.
Wow.
And if you're a footballer, you're constantly trying to, and I think the government are on board to well, maybe we shouldn't be taking you out of football for 2 years. But at some point, you've got to do your 2 years. So winning the Asian Games, I think they were playing Japan in the final, if memory serves. And I just said, what was it like the night before? He said he didn't sleep for the entire night, knowing that he's not trying to get out of national service, but this would get him out of national service, that he could then maybe do at a later date. And I think he scored in the final, they won, and he got the gold medal. And he subsequently gave up an off-season and went on the border between South Korea and North Korea. I'm sure he'll do some more voluntary work at the end, but this is him saying, look, I still want to help, but you just can't imagine, can you, being, playing a football match that isn't a Champions League final. You are playing for your country if that's not enough pressure, but it's that if you win the game, you don't have to stand on the border with North Korea for 2 years.
There are very few instances where you're playing for that.
Yes, but anything other than your own glory, the nation's glory, the club's glory, your fans, your family, yourself, that was for something massive, and it was really interesting to talk to him about it. So but more often than not, these guys these days are really, really good. They're really good company. They give really good interviews. If you want to talk to them about football, they love it. And I said to Eden Hazard one day, I said, what's your favourite goal? He said, you're a Leicester fan, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, that goal against Chelsea. No, that goal against Spurs. I was like, you're just saying that. He went, well, maybe, but that'll do for this interview. And I said, yeah, fine, I'll take it. Yeah. So they're genuinely very, very good guys who I think maybe in days gone by footballers were very guarded. Now, if you go in with the right attitude with them, and you're well researched, and you know what you're talking about, and you're not taking the mickey, they tend to be really good at interviews, and they're a joy to spend time.
I think it's about having different questions as well.
Yeah,
because you don't want to, as you said with Guardiola, it was maybe his 5th interview of the day. You want to be different. You don't want to ask the same questions over and over. So I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, I said to him one day, and I can remember, and again, his eyes lit up. I said, what would you change about football? What rule would you change, or law would you change? And he said, no one's ever asked me that. And he said, I'd have one timeout per half.
Yeah.
I was like, that makes sense, because he quite likes basketball. He's into his American sports. And he said, I'd love to be able to just get them all in, just even for a minute, just to say, right, this is the new plan, rather than having to shout it across the field, or you tell him, or send a note on. He would love to have a timeout, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you've mentioned Jurgen Klopp briefly, but there's always been sort of scrutiny with him in the media. Sometimes he's good with reports, sometimes he's not. What was your experiences like overall? Did you ever catch him on a bad day, or was he just always in a good mood with you?
I didn't catch him on a bad day. He was always genuinely in a good mood, but I never interviewed him directly after a match.
Okay.
And what I would say is that these managers in this day and age, they give a pre-match press conference, so a day or two before, depending on whether they're home and away. Well, it's generally home or away is the day before, isn't it? Then when they get to the ground, they're giving interview after interview before the game to the club media, to the national broadcaster, to national radio, to local radio. Then it's the game, and then you lose, to a last minute dodgy penalty, and then you've got to do all of those again, and you're not feeling probably on top of the world. Then the next day, you might be in training. The following day, you're doing another pre-match because you've got 3 games that week. So I think if a manager has a reputation like Jurgen Klopp, and generally speaking, he is giving, he doesn't belittle interviewers, he's entertaining, he's honest and transparent, I think you can forgive every now and again being a bit grumpy.
Yeah.
These are human beings, and if once or twice, I think he had a point about the Saturday kickoffs, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, he used to moan on about that time and time again, but then you look at it and you think, well, that isn't right. You shouldn't have to
play. They had double more than anyone else.
Yes, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I know Liverpool are a box office team, but they're also a team that plays at high levels in Europe a lot, and in the Champions League, and was going to Champions League finals, and you've got them playing away virtually every other week on a Saturday lunchtime. If I were a manager, I'd be pretty miffed with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I think he had a good point. And then people will always say, well, he's moaning again. But I think that's a valid point. But I think by and large, if you don't think that Jurgen Klopp was an amazing thing for English football during the period that he was here, then I think you need to give your head a tilt.
Oh, the impact he has was just incredible.
Arlo, I have to say, Henry's been dying to ask you that question all day.
But do you think he was then perceived as a bit moody during certain interviews, or?
I think sometimes. But I think whenever he was, that was clipped up because that was the story, right? Whereas when he was good in like a press conference, it was just sort of standard, we'll say. So I guess you sort of saw more bad than good. But I take it most of the time he was like engaging, and I mean results-wise, if he won, he would be, wouldn't he? So
yeah.
I mean, it's sort of what portrays on social media, for example.
I'd rather these guys be human beings than monotone sort of, and if you want them to be more genuine and more human, you can't just expect them to be happy all the time. You have to take the entertainment. If you want that, then on certain occasions he's not going to be particularly happy, but as a viewer they're equally interesting. So you're still getting value, I think.
I mean, perhaps I need to take a leaf out of Ted Lasso's book.
Well, be a goldfish. Yeah. Just forget absolutely everything. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk one more question for me about Inside the Mind. Then we'll talk about Jason Sudeikis and a lot more. But was there ever a manager that you thought he's going to be a bit boring, or he's not going to be perhaps very tactical, and they've surprised you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm just trying to think of. I'm just buying some time, Harvey. No, it is a good question. In order to be in the Premier League, you have to have plenty about you, obviously. And I was surprised that it didn't work out for Frank. On the time that the first time at Chelsea, which is when I interviewed him, because he's just a very, very bright, football orientated guy, and was the Everton move a sensible one? But I suppose if you want to be a Premier League manager, then you have to take opportunities like that. And it's good to see him sort of rebuilding that reputation at Coventry. He's doing a really good job there.
Yes,
and I was quite surprised to see him take that job. I wouldn't say there's nobody that I've come away thinking, he's going to struggle. Really, I'm just trying to go back through the Rolodex. There were so many. I mean, you generally, when you're talking to these guys, you come away just impressed. Just impressed with them and their knowledge and their ability to lead. You can see how you would want to follow that person into battle, if you like. You can see the more cerebral ones. Roberto Martinez, very cerebral guy. David Moyes, before we started recording, was talking to me about he'd volunteered during COVID, during lockdown, to take all the shopping round to the old ladies' houses and stuff like that, and they'd answer the door and it'd be like, David Moyes has left the shopping there, and they'd be like, oh, hello, and he'd be like, all right, there's no problem, I hope you're doing all right, and you're like, well, it's just brilliant when you get these, these little tidbits. No, there was nobody that I generally thought that, they were going to struggle. Because look, to be honest, if there was a caretaker manager or something like that, we would wait for the Klopps and the Guardiolas and the Pochettinos and the Brendan Rodgers and the Arsene Wengers and people like that, so guys that were had a short lifespan potentially, we probably weren't going to see much of them. But generally speaking, very impressed with them as people.
Well, moving on to Ted Lasso, what can you tell us about the new season and your involvement as well?
Well, I signed for Richmond as their goalkeeper, which came as a huge surprise to me.
Left wing to goalkeeper.
I'm going to gradually make my way back, like I did in my actual footballing career. I know as much as you do, really. I mean, I've known for a while it's been in the works, because Jason originally and the writing team, they had an idea for a 3-season arc, which they did, and in order to film each season, Jason was, and the rest, and all the other American-based people were having to spend 8 months of the year in England.
Blimey.
Now, if that's okay, but if you've got kids that are back in America, you've got a life that's back in America, that's a tall order. That's a really large undertaking, in someone's own life. But other aspects come into it, I suppose. Look, it was just hugely successful, and maybe after having a bit of time in between the end of season 3, I mean, money talks as well, obviously, but maybe he's thought to himself, no, there are more stories to tell here. And I think he was on a podcast with the Kelsey brothers, the NFL, Jason Kelsey and Travis Kelsey.
Yeah.
Who've just done a podcast deal for like $100 million or something.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Guys, I mean,
that's coming towards us. Come on,
this might tip us over the edge. And he said, look, Ted's going to be the manager of a women's team, which is a natural progression. I know Jason is wild about women's sports in America, huge supporter of them. You regularly see him at NWSL and WNBA games or women's college basketball games. He's a Kansas City guy, and Kansas City have, I think, the world's first women's soccer specific stadium, the Kansas City Current. So whether it's to do with them, I don't honestly know, and what that means for AFC Richmond, I don't know. So maybe you'll see I don't know, Ted in America and AFC Richmond still being operated in the UK. How they meet, I've no idea, but how they structure it's going to be very interesting, and we'll see if I've got a part to play. I don't know.
Well, I was just going to say, I really hope you are, because when I watched Ted Lasso, it was just enjoy. I wanted to watch it all in one go, but I sort of didn't want it to stop because it was so good, and even you being in it just was that part of that well-rounded package. I just thought it's one of my favourite series, if not the.
It's been a very slow burner over here, and I think it was because Apple TV Plus probably not as many people had it over here as perhaps had it in the States. And then you have the added aspect of, oh my God, Americans trying to do a show about soccer and
and stereotypes play a part.
Which Ted plays up or down to, depending how you look at it. But it's a show that's not just about football. It's about a lot more than that. It's just based around a football team, and. It took a while, but I mean, honestly, every week now I'm getting people call me and so I've just seen you're in Ted Lasso. I'm like, yeah, well, we're meant to watch it. Then I got a 6-month free with O2 or something like that when I got a mobile phone, so I've been able to watch it. And here we are. I had a part in a feature film. That we filmed in January. Now, I did know the director before, but she was only reminded of me when she watched Ted Lasso. She said, I've just seen you in Ted Lasso. Do you want a part in this film? I'm like, sure, why not?
Absolutely.
So acting, is something that I quite enjoy doing and potentially might pursue, in the future. But yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm delighted they're doing 4, because they won't just do 4. I imagine it'll be 4, 5, and 6, another 3 seasons. So yeah, again, we'll see.
Maybe James Bond.
Well, they need one, don't they? Yeah, but they need a long commitment, and I think my sell-by date as well, because I'd be like 70 by the time it came to an end, But maybe one of those spin-off Apple seasons now. Sorry, Amazon seasons. Amazon's bought it now. There's going to be about 5 James Bonds now in the future, isn't there? With all these spin-offs.
Well, have you got a favourite moment from the show, or even a favourite moment being on the set?
Favourite moment, I think, on the set was Jason coming up, because we filmed at Hayes and Yedding Football Club, which was just down the road from the studio. It's about a 15-minute walk down the road. And it was a non-league ground that I think somebody had spent a lot of money on building a main stand, and then maybe the money had run out or something. So it was an empty shell behind. So they were able to build some sets and put hair and makeup, behind the stand. And part of the stand we turned into the press box. And I think Jason had just been filming the darts scene in the studio down the road, and he'd seen on the list that I was going to be there that day, and he came across and had a word with me and Chris, and he just said, I've just been doing a bit of darts over there. Well, I think it's going to work out, And we had no concept of what that scene was going to look like, and it was one of the greatest scenes of the entire series, wasn't it? It was just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. What was it? He said barbecue sauce.
And he's just, what you didn't ask me was I used to play this all the time.
Oh, it's a fantastic scene.
Love to see him at the darts. Palace at Frimley. Not where is it? Alexandra Palace.
Yeah,
imagine
yeah,
Ted Lasso
Oh,
walks out in the first round.
Everyone would go crazy.
Brilliant.
And he wipes wipes the floor with Luke Littler, a 9-darter from Lasso. That would be funny. But so that was great. And also, I think after they call it a golden wrap, which is when you finished your final scene, if you like, and Chris Powell and I went to the Hope and Anchor, the pub, and had a pint in the make believe boozer afterwards. Yes. So that was quite good to be in there, because obviously I didn't do any scenes in there. So that was a very cool experience.
No, I can imagine. Yeah. Did you meet any of the other cast members? I met
Brett Goldstein.
Oh wow.
Roy Kent.
Yes.
We did a photo thing one day. I waved at Hannah Waddingham, excuse me, from a distance at one point. But this was after season 1, and we're just filming season 2. And Brett said, and he was kind of half in character, and he kind of went, it's nice to meet you. And I went, yeah, you're great to meet you. God, I said, the show's just gone gangbusters, hasn't it, over there? And he said, yeah, it's done well. He said, I wish people had stopped talking about their fucking commentator. I was like, are you or are you Roy Kent at this moment? You know, but it was definitely Roy Kent in the photos, because he had a real stern expression on his face. Yeah. But at that point, I think he was going over to America, and obviously had a bit of a name over there, being the Premier League commentator. But now I think it's fair to say that Brett Goldstein is now a way bigger name than I could ever wish to be over there, and Roy Kent is far more established and far more recognised. But that was after season 1. It was just an interesting thing, and typically, it just made me laugh.
Yes, yeah, he's a brilliant actor in it. He plays a good part.
Yeah, so he's doing great things in America. So good for him.
Yeah,
I mean, do you keep in touch with everyone from Ted Lasso?
No, not only Jason sporadically. No, because I didn't really kind of have an opportunity to build a relationship with them, because Chris and I did our bits, entirely separately. Chris and I stay in touch. Yeah. So the night before the Euro final at Wembley, I was in Vegas. We'd just done a tournament in Vegas, and I was texting with him, wishing him all the best. I think he was in the King's New Year's honours list as well. So I congratulated him on that, and he and I got on really, really well. So I keep in touch with Chris, and sporadically with Jason we exchange texts every now and again. I think he's due one now about season 4.
Finally, from it, I know you said you're off to Miami soon. Have you got any more exciting projects or anything coming up?
Nothing outside of Live Golf, really. It's been interesting, because the season when it starts is so intense, but then it frees up a large period of time outside of it. So the off season's quite long, but at that point people have already filled positions for football commentators and things like that. And I've got to a point in my career where I don't necessarily need to go out and do that sort of stuff. So I'm exploring other things, and writing, and a bit of acting as well, as I did in the last off season is a lot of fun. We'll see what happens with Liv. The contract comes to an end at the end of this year. I would dearly love to sign a new one and keep travelling the world with an exciting new project, and see where it takes us. We're getting more and more traction all the time. But the people that I work with and the events that we cover are so good. They're so entertaining, and we're now on ITV.
Yes.
As well. We've done a deal with ITV, so we've spent a lot of time at the moment on ITVX, ITV4, but as the season goes on and the times get a little kinder, when we get over to America, or here in Spain in the summer, then we're going to pop up a lot more on ITV itself. So that's brilliant for us, and we've done a deal with Fox in the States as well. So we're going to be on the main Fox on the Saturday and Sunday afternoon, which is like being on ITV in America, which potentially could be huge for us, because we are battling against a torrent of PR from the golf media in America, who are not reporting this objectively at all. They are completely on the PGA Tour's side of things, and they're trying to sort of will Live Golf out of existence, which isn't going to work.
No.
Not with the deals that we've been signing with broadcasters and with venues and that sort of thing. So we go to Miami next week, and then get back for a week or so. Then we go from Mexico City direct via LA, I think it is, to Seoul, South Korea.
Wow.
And then we really start with the US sort of leg in the summer, and we're at the JCB, which is about 15 miles away from here in July, which was
amazing.
a great success
Yeah.
last year in Staffordshire. So the Live Golf is brilliant. I'd never expected to be a golf commentator or presenter, but it's been honestly the best move I've ever made. I've really enjoyed it. So long may it continue. I want it to be my last job and then retire and do a bit of writing.
Yes, yeah.
And just live off Ted Lasso for the rest of
So all of this travelling is making me jealous, lads.
I know.
So we're going to be stuck
come on,
here.
guys! You've got dissertations to do. I'm not that lucky. You've got exams and all that sort of thing. God, what are you moaning about?
Oh dear.
Sorry to bring the tempo down.
No, you had to go there, Arlo.
We're not looking forward to that, boys.
You'll breeze it, fellas.
Oh, thank you, Arlo. Honestly, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. It's been a
you're
really
more than
good chat,
welcome.
so we appreciate it. Please, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, go and watch it because
Yes.
it's absolutely amazing.
Yes.
And you can follow Arlo on all his social media, on Instagram. I know you're very active on there, including the automated toilet seats now.
Yes, walked
Come
into my
represent-
bathroom the other day. These are the first world problems I have to deal with these days. You walk into your own bathroom and the toilet seat does not automatically pop up.
At least we don't have that problem.
Walked into the bedroom and the curtains did not automatically open. It was not a good day. It was not a
No,
good
I
day.
could imagine. But thank you so much, Arlo. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, chaps.